In this video, we're going to start the female reproductive system. So a lot of it's going to be kind of quick overview of the anatomy, and then we'll get into kind of more how eggs are ovulated each month and the menstrual cycle. So first, the functions of the female reproductive is going to be sex hormones. So we're going to see majorly in this instance, it's going to be estrogen. Functional gametes. So this is going to be ova, or an ovum is singular, ova is plural, so eggs. But also then supporting and developing embryo. So that's going to be the first 8 weeks. And then growing fetus after that. And then actually talk about mammary glands that can be nourishment for a newborn. So again, looking at some anatomy. So we have the external genitalia, so things that you can see from the outside. The first is going to be kind of the vulval area. So that's going to be this area here with external genitalia. Urethra, outer kind of vulvar lips, we'll see. Internal genitalia is going to be the uterus and the ovaries and the uterine tubes, which you also will hear is fallopian, so same thing. Also the vagina, so everything that's on the inside that can't be seen externally from just looking at a female. The last thing that we don't think about for reproductive structures necessarily all the time is going to be mammary glands. That's going to be for milk production. So for infant, we can supply milk to feed them and give them nutrition. So looking more specifically, external genitalia, we have the clitoris, which can be kind of the erectile tissue of the female. So it does have similarities of the male, so the penis. Remember, we had a prepuce, or the foreskin of the penis. There's a prepuce of the clitoris. So we have a glands of the penis. We have a glands of the clitoris. So there's an exposed portion, which is the glands, and then there's tissue that's covering it. So again, it's the erectile tissue, which is similarities to the penis. And the other part of external genitalia, again, is mammary glands, so the breasts. We also have the mons pubis. That's going to be fat tissue that's going to be over the pubic symphysis, and it's usually in the anterior side. I'll show you on a different picture. So it's just kind of protecting, extra padding, extra protection of the pubic symphysis. Remember, the pubic symphysis is a cartilaginous joint that's between the two sides of the pubic bone. So we have the pubic bone here and here, and then we have this kind of piece in between them. That's the pubic symphysis. We also have glands. This is surrounding the vaginal opening. So around the actual vaginal opening, there's some glands that are around it. These, again, are similar to the bulbourethral glands. Now, you remember for males, that's for mucus production, at least partially. So that's going to be the same thing. Mucus for into kind of the area surrounding the vaginal opening for lubrication again. You also have what we call vestibular bulbs. This is more erectile tissue other than the clitoris. That's also on either side of the vaginal entrance. So you have kind of erectile tissue here. That's going to be similar to the corpus spongiosum of the penis. So again, we have similarities of just kind of where it originates. Corpus spongiosum, if you remember, is surrounding the urethra in the penis that is filling with blood, has cavernous spaces that can fill with blood, part of erectile tissue. So picture. So the mom's pubis, again, this is going to be anterior. Oop, this is going to be anterior here. Apparently you can't do that. And then this is going to be posterior here. So you can look at the vaginal opening or the vaginal entrance. We'll look at labia majora, which is the larger vulvar lips. And then we have labia minor, which is smaller vulvar lips. We have the opening of the urethra here. So around the vaginal entrance is going to be where you have the bulbs and the glands here. So it's going to be surrounding there. Clitoris, anterior portion, anterior to the labia minora, um, in the kind of vulval area. Surrounding kind of between the labia minora is actually the vestibule. So it's just kind of a space. The vagina is going to be the beginning of the internal genitalia. It extends to the vestibule, so that space that I just showed you surrounding the labia minora, so labia minora, and you have the vaginal opening here, and it goes into internally, part of the internal genitalia, into the cervix. It's about 7.5 to 9 centimeters long, so it's not too long, but it can change in diameter, meaning it can stretch, which makes sense because we know vagina is going to be the birth canal. So vaginal canal is also known as the birth canal. So this is where birthing is going to happen. So during labor and delivery, the baby's going to pass from the uterus through the vagina into um, the outside world. So it can stretch a lot because it's going to be able to stretch enough that it can fit a baby through. So function of the vagina, it's pretty much an entrance or an exit. So menstrual fluids are going to exit from the uterus through the vagina. Um, it receives during sexual intercourse the penis and then can actually hold sperm until they move into the uterus. And then part of the birth canal. So looking at the parts of the vagina, so again, we have the vestibule between the labia minora. So I can just look at here. So we have the vaginal canal, just like we've seen in the stomach and in the urinary bladder. When we need something to stretch, we have rugae. So rugae are going to be folds that are going to occur when the vagina is relaxed that can stretch and allow for stretching and not tearing of this area when it needs to stretch significantly. So the vaginal canal is kind of the major passageway, the majority of the vagina. It is surrounded by non-keratinized, so doesn't have a dead upper layer like the epidermis, but stratified squamous because it is protective. There is abrasive kind of components to what's happening in the vagina. So having kind of protective component of having many layers of cells of the epithelium is important. We also have a pharynx, which is going to be just kind of the cervix will kind of stick down into the vagina. So there's just kind of this little blind ended pouch in the vagina that's called the vaginal pharynx. We also have hymen. So we have kind of this entrance to the vagina has kind of tissue or an epithelial kind of layer that can partially block the entrance to the vagina. Oftentimes, this isn't around. Sometimes it can be there, but it can be stretched or torn, not just because of intercourse, because we've seen, like, if you have a torn hymen, intercourse has occurred, but it can also happen because of other things like tampons or even just heavy exercise. So it's not necessarily just with intercourse that the hymen kind of breaks, is what we say. But it is protective. Before puberty, usually it's an intact. But like I said, sometimes it's not. Just another protective component because most of the things that are happening or should be happening in the vagina are going to be after puberty. So just again, rugae, the hymen's here, vestibule between the labia minora, cervix is going to be up here. We'll talk about later. Fornix and vaginal canal. The mammary glands are going to be nourishment or milk, so milk production or what we call lactation. We talked about the hormones like oxytocin and prolactin that are going to control milk production. They can be released not only by the pituitary, also help be increased release because of the reproductive system, but also the placenta can cause increased release of it. It's on the anterior chest, mammary glands over the pectoralis major muscle. So, looking at the structure of mammary gland, it's in the subcutaneous tissue, so underneath the dermis and the epidermis, and it's going to be between the pectoral fat pad, so deep to the skin, underneath the skin. So this is where a lot of the fat is produced, kind of around the mammary glands. We have suspensory ligaments. That's going to be connective tissue that's going to surround kind of the gland part of it that can separate into lobes and lobules and help kind of hold the glands in place. So, where the glandular tissue is. So, we have the glandular tissue, which is actual functional tissue in mammary glands that's going to produce milk that can be produced divided into lobes and then lobules, and we have secretory alveoli, so separate from what we learned in the lungs. This is going to be alveoli that are going to be producing milk when needed. So each one of your ducts from the lobules, so each lobule is going to come together and produce a lactiferous. So lobules converged into lactiferous duct per lobe. These are all near the nipple that can perform a sinus. So we can have a little kind of stretched out area, sinus, where it can be storage just before the nipple, because that's where milk is going to be ejected. So there's about 15 to 20 of these sinuses that are surrounding the nipple, just in kind of just with inside, so that milk is all kind of converging and coming together so that it can be released by the nipple. The areola is going to be that kind of darkened pigmented skin, so reddish brown skin that's surrounding the nipple, and it's kind of bumpy. So there's grainy texture, and that's because of sebaceous glands that are kind of around that. It can also help with protection from nursing as well. So better picture looking at it. So we have the pectoralis major, we have the pectoral fat pad, which is adipose tissue, and then we have all our suspensory ligaments. Again, it's kind of helping with holding breast tissue and aligning it. So all these are suspensory ligaments from the pectoralis major. We have the lobules, which are going to be the separate kind of grape looking parts. Again, similarities to looking at the lungs. And then one kind of group of these grape looking things is a lobe. Again, all of these are going to drain into the lactiferous duct. So we have secretory alveoli that are going to be within, so you can't necessarily see them. They're within each one of the lobules. And it's going to lead to a lactiferous duct. This widening part is the lactiferous sinus. And then we have all these leading to the nipple, and then the areola surrounding it. So if we're looking at overall the female kind of reproductive structures, the gonads, so the ones that are making the gametes, that are going to be ovulating eggs, are the ovaries, and they also produce hormones that we'll see later on, excuse me. And then we also have the female reproductive tract. So these are the tubes, basically. We have the uterine tubes, again, used to be called fallopian tubes. That's connection between the uterus and the ovaries. So we'll see that. So that's going to deliver the oocyte, so kind of maturing egg, or an embryo if we're fertilized, because this is where fertilization occurs, is going to be in the uterine tubes. So that's going to deliver these things to the uterus, connection between the ovaries and the uterus. The uterus is where the embryo and eventually the fetus develops. And we can also have an exchange between kind of tissue of maternal and either embryonic and fetal bloodstream. That's kind of fancy saying of what the placenta does. So we look at the ovaries. There's two of them normally. They're going to be around the uterus, so a lot of times kind of flanked on both sides, and then you have uterine tubes coming in to the uterus here. Each ovary is kind of suspended in the abdominal pelvic area by the ovarian ligament, which is actually going to hold the ovary to the uterus, so there is connection between that. You also have a suspensory ligament that's going to hold the ovary to the pelvic wall, so it's actually going to suspend the ovary that way. And you're also going to have mesovarium, which is going to help as well. So we actually have kind of a broad tissue-like, it's more over here, broad tissue ligament that you're going to see that's going to also help hold the ovary in place. So the broad ligament is actually kind of, we have sections of it. So mesovarium is going to be around the ovary. We also have it around the tubes and also the uterus and the vagina as well. So it's a really large flat ligament that we'll see. So the ovary, again, there's two. They're usually about almond shaped. They're small, not too large, and they're closer, more lateral. So again, the picture that I just drew, so the uterine tubes, so they're going to be more lateral. Again, they are where gametes are produced. So we'll see they're actually produced and held from birth. So when a female's born, it's actually they actually have the supply of oocytes they do for their entirety of their life. We're also going to look at the ovarian cycle and the different hormones and different times that it produces. It produces estrogens and progesterone at different times of the cycle. And same that we saw with males, it can secrete inhibin, which can inhibit FSH production, which is going to inhibit follicles that we'll see, which can lead to ovulation. So we have multiple layers, and you saw tunica albuginea when we talked about the testes. We have the germinal epithelium. That's going to be covering the ovary. and actually continuous with visceral peritoneum. So, kind of looking at the covering we have of the abdominal cavity, and the abdominal organs in the abdominal cavity. So, we have kind of the outer germinal layer. We have the tunica albuginea, which is again kind of connective tissue, fibrous kind of connective tissue that's just inside the germinal epithelium. And then we have a cortex and a medulla that we've seen multiple times in things like the adrenal glands and the kidneys. The cortex are where the oocytes are going to be produced and follicles are going to change. And then the medulla is the inside. So we'll look at it. So again, germinal epithelium is the outer kind of covering. Then we have the tunica albuginea. Then we have the cortex, which is going to be where all your oocytes and your follicles. And then the inner part is going to be medulla. A lot of times that's blood supply. Then over here, you can see the uterine tube. Here you can see the mesoovarium, so part of holding the ovary in place, part of the broad ligament, you can see there. So we're looking overall again, the ovary is here, the uterine tube, and we'll talk about the infundibulum is kind of catching the egg. So you'll see parts of the uterine tube when we get to that in lab. You have the uterus. Then you have, so you have the uterus, you have the cervix that's here, and then you have vagina, and clitoris is going to be in this section here. And we have the labia, both minora and majora. So again, the ovarian ligament is going to be from the uterus to the medial surface, so the inner surface of the ovary. So again, the way we see it, I'm just going to draw one side. So the uterus would be coming down here. So we have an ovarian ligament that's going to be right here. We have mesoovarium, which is going to help support the ovary as well. And then we have a suspensory ligament, which is going to be to the pelvic wall laterally. And then we have the broad ligament, which includes the mesovarium, encloses the ovaries, uterine tubes, the uterus. It also is for attachments too, so it can attach all these to the lateral sides and also the lower part of the pelvic cavity. So better picture. So here's the ovary, here's the uterine tube, and then here's the uterus. So this is your ovarian ligament. So again, medial side of the ovary here, connecting to the uterus. All of this kind of tissue here showing you the broad ligament covering all of this. So specifically, this is the mesoovarium right here. So just this little section of kind of the entirety. Then you can see, so over here, you can see this would be the ovarian ligament. This is the mesoovarium over here. And then this is the suspensory ligament that's going to the lateral side of the pelvis. Near the suspensory, you see the ovarian artery and vein. So part of blood supply. Also, broad ligament, you'll see a lot of blood supply going to the uterus as well. So broad ligament, it's really wide and flat.